Once upon a time, between two rivers, a little tile laying game was #1 on boardgamegeek. It was on the top of the world. That was a while ago in board game history, and the game slipped and slipped. And 25 years after its release, Tigris and Euphrates finally slid out of the top 100. But why? I honestly don't know. I don't really know. I mean, maybe it's because this game is always out of print, because Tigris and Euphrates is still called a masterpiece today by quite a bit of people. Of course, this masterpiece title is something we'll get back to, but I've played this game about a dozen times, and I have an inkling of a feeling of why it had this drop off in popularity. I sprung into this classic about 8 years ago as a wee teenager before this game went into production hell, and I fell in love with this clean tile laying game, placing it firmly in my top 10. Then the years went on, and it became fringe top 15. And then it just kind of, I just didn't really want to play it anymore. And a lot of my core gaming group did not like it.
For me, that's a D. Actually, no wait, I don't think I want to play it. It's actually stuff. Wow, okay.
I went hard on playing this game again recently, and the design certainly holds up. But, in 2022, it just felt more and more out of place to me. So let's get to the problem with this popular famous game. Well, Tigris and Euphrates is a large river system in Western Asia, which, I'm sorry, that's the wrong Tigris and Euphrates page. There we go. Okay, real talk, so this game's still set in Western Asia around rivers, where you got tiles, you got leaders, and you got points to gain. You have 2 actions a turn, and most actions will be of placing 1 tile down from your hand of tiles. Tile goes there, that's one of my actions. So that's where the leaders come in, as placing 1 costs an action. And if you have a leader just chilling in an area that matches the color of tile you put down, you get that color of point. Naturally, this works for everyone's turns. So if someone else places a blue tile and you have a blue dude there, you get a blue point during their turn from their action. Super easy game, right? Well, first thing about your points you keep hidden, they're tricky because throw out basically all of them. Only the color you have the least amount in matters at the end of the game. Yeah, here's another example. Even if you had all these points, you really only have 2 points here. Number 2 thing is that the leaders that generate points aren't safe on the board. Players can just kick each other's leaders out by just plopping down the same color leader in that area, since you can only have 1 color of leader in an area at a time. The leaders fight each other for control of that area, which means that the fighting players discard red tiles from their hand to boost their leader's strength. This is called a revolt, and the loser has to leave. The winner gets a little bit of red points and gets to stay. Third, you can get a lot of points from something called a war. This is probably the most bonkers part about the game, where if you ever connect 2 kingdoms or clusters of tiles, a war for the ages happens, where leaders have to fight for survival, because remember, only 1 color of dude per kingdom. Leaders draw their strength from how many tiles of their color are in their kingdom. Then you can discard that same color from your hand of tiles to boost their strength. The loser removes their leader, and all tiles of that color in the old kingdom disappear. And each tile that disappeared is a natural point in addition to gaining 1 for winning the fight. Ooh, wow. Oh, and leaders will still keep fighting until there's only 1 color of each leader left. Fight, 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 fight. There's the new formed kingdom. What's left after the violent combining. Fourth thing about getting points is getting treasure. See, it's good to connect some areas on the board, where as you connect them, you can start grabbing treasures with your green leader from these treasure places. And these treasures are wild points at the end of the game, so they can improve whatever your lowest number happens to be. Last thing about points is choosing to transform 4 tiles into a monument, a nice building with 2 colors that will give income of these colors if you have the matching leaders at the end of a turn. Hooray for passive income! Yeah, so you can start to see how having leaders fighting over positioning is a huge part of the game. And that's kinda it. The game just ends when this bag you refill your hand of tiles with every turn empties, or a certain amount of treasures gets removed from the board. Now you kinda know the bare basics of Tigris and Euphrates, minus a whole bunch of mechanical detail we'll get into. But really, we wouldn't be talking about Tigris and Euphrates at all if it wasn't so awesome of a game. So yeah, where do we even start with this? Well, first off, for its components, it does a very good job of being a board game, with setup and takedown incredibly easy to do, and the game doesn't run too much farther past an hour, even with newcomers, with turns being snappy at just 2 actions. But man, you can do a lot with 2 actions. This game just has a lot of darn nuance. See, we didn't say this yet, but when you place anything in Tigris and Euphrates, you can pretty much put it anywhere. Anywhere. Except for the rivers, the Tigris, or is this one the Euphrates? Okay, whatever. You can only put blue tiles on them. But yeah, there's no actual moving restriction, so you have 6 tiles to place from your hand, and 4 leaders you can place and relocate at all times. So there's a huge feeling of possibly being anywhere in Mesopotamia. Tigris and Euphrates is also one of the most interactive games I've ever played, because, see, if you can place anywhere on the board, here, or here, well then that means that everyone is just connected at all times. Nobody owns tiles on the board or owns kingdoms. Rather, every single thing on this map is just kind of shared. You can have multiple players growing a single kingdom, all trying to pull it in their own directions. Someone can drop a leader in 2 or maybe even 3 different kingdoms, giving them a lot of avenues to get points across the board, but they just can't dedicate that much attention to each area, making each of these leaders easier to kick out. The consistently epic part is the wars, where you have kingdoms, each stacked with different players, being joined to have the work you've been doing all clash into one another. Like, look at this war, every single person will be fighting here. And eventual winners will not only get great payouts and points, but losers can see the tiles they've been placing all game just disappear. Be careful of any war against you. And innocent bystanders can benefit a lot. What if you cause a war that you're not part of and let your 2 enemies fight to the death? This is even more so because if you start the war, you get to choose in which order people fight in, so you can watch others tear each other apart in the order you want, while you take a drink. Then once it's all done, use your second action to exploit the new ravaged board. Like, look at all these tiles disappearing. The map is going through upheaval. It's like ancient Mesopotamia is going through revolution, as kings, nobles, and other colors of leaders fight. This makes much of Tigris and Euphrates about planning for wars, as you place tiles to have kingdoms slowly creep towards one another, being very mindful about what color you're putting down to reinforce your kingdom. And then you're constantly counting how many tiles of each color are in others' kingdoms to see what the heck you're up against if they wage war on you. And then, sorry, we lied before, it's not just tiles and leaders, it's tiles, leaders, and 2 disaster tokens, which are like mini nukes that you can place to cover up any other tile as a simple action. Okay, this seems a little innocent until you realize that you can cut off leaders from their power source, aka their color of tile, or to split kingdoms for your own nefarious plans to restart wars later. The list goes on and on. The ace in the hole for the multiplayer in-person dynamics so well is the hidden information. You just don't exactly know what people have in their hands, mostly using their existing tiling patterns to guess what they have. So how much does each player have to fight you with if you start a war? And everyone's points are hidden. Oh gosh, I really need black and green, but I can't act like I need them. Counterplaying others is tricky and filled with mind games as people are sweating over different colors. Who is really winning? He's been getting so many points from his monument, but what is his lowest category of points again? Like, dang, is this game clever? I've even seen people intentionally losing wars, not caring that they're giving one player a bunch of points in one category, and then having their own kingdom just lose a bunch of tiles. Why would they do that? Well, they want to cut off connections for this guy to the monument because they think that this guy needs a lot of black and green from this monument. Or how about players being very aware of building next to the corners of the board, so that their kingdom can only get attacked from certain angles? Or how since the game can end when the bag runs out of tiles, I've seen players try to rush to end the game by discarding tiles as an action, then drawing that many again. Or games where no one wants to build a monument, ending in a low-scoring game, because players just can't ensure that they can retain control of it, especially since making a monument would lose that kingdom 4 tiles, and those 4 tiles are probably ones that you wanted to keep to give your leader strength. But then all this leader strength for wars that we've been talking about doesn't even matter if someone revolts against you, so make sure you keep some red tiles in your hand to discard in case of a revolt. And remember, this is a game called Tigris and Euphrates, so it does have many elements that pay homage to that era. Sure, it can kind of look abstract, and we'll get back to that, but it does give a bird's eye view of dropping political influence on growing kingdoms, pushing and pulling them to your own means, and then even inciting small rebellions or revolts. Time for a new leader when the time is right. Man, this game is good. And even when I put my critical pants on, I mean, this isn't a proper review with a recommender score, but I still totally see where people are coming from when they call this a masterpiece. Me, on the other hand, I prefer the term near masterpiece because there's definitely a distinct turn order advantage where going first is just a little better. And openings can look pretty similar, with players mostly just placing a leader and tile on the first turn. But then afterwards, each game definitely branches out in diversity, and then there's even a backside to the board we got. So yeah, I'll say it again, this game is freaking good. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it would still be top 100, at least today, if it wasn't perpetually in production hell. What is going on, Dr. Kniza? Your game is good, let more people play your game. But these production and publishing issues aren't the reason why I'm saying this game has a problem. Tigris and Euphrates has a problem because in 2022, it feels like it's fulfilling a niche that is slowly going out of favor and or getting replaced in this hobby, board gaming as a whole. Let's back up through all the awesomeness. Remember how I said this game only had 2 actions? That may sound simple with only 4 colors to keep track of, but Tigris and Euphrates is actually hard to play well. This near masterpiece has one of the trickiest skill curves I've ever seen for a multiplayer game that doesn't have that much politics to balance players out. And the very existence of wars means that games can get utterly upset if players accidentally start a war that massively helps a losing player.
What? Chaos, that's why.
Wait, I think that actually was
11 rigs, that's insane.
Or how about if you position your leaders poorly so you can't ever get a proper point engine going? Or players just letting someone maintain control of a monument that is obviously the exact colors they need to win. And it's hard to blame newcomers because this game isn't intuitive with you getting to place anywhere you want on the board, which is already pretty brain-burny, then that's combined with the weirdness of raising your lowest color of points. T&E is nothing like a classic Euro, or engine builder, or even war game. It's a game where you're not building something for yourself. You're building something for Mesopotamia and trying to profit along the way. There's no card flips or special abilities to spring on people, nope, but it demands tons of conflict to win. In fact, the game can have so much conflict that it can feel like it's leaning too hard into being a tactical game, which can discourage some long-term thinkers, especially if you want to win with a certain strategy you crafted from the beginning of the game. Plans can get utterly blown apart by someone just repositioning their leader onto you. Oh, okay, well, are they trolling there? Are they playing serious? Well, either way, that ruined your plan to put that tile there. Such is the consequence of letting anyone go anywhere in a high conflict game. Like imagine building up this kingdom here, and then someone comes along and says, I think it'd be funny to connect it to something else. I'm just gonna connect it. So they spend multiple turns to connect that kingdom to another kingdom, and then now you're fighting. Also remember, after this conflict, stuff gets deleted off the board. Add this to how your turns are quite determined by your tiles in hand. There's no asymmetry to plan off of, and most games seem to culminate in massive wars in one way or another, which could potentially become too samey after a couple of plays. And we talked a lot about wars, kingdoms, leaders, monuments, which all feel pretty fitting for a game called Tigris and Euphrates. But then, there's an intensity on focusing on colors, which can start to abstract the game while you're actually playing it. Instead of putting red temples next to the river banks, or black leaders to be kings of Mesopotamia, or even a green tile to be a market, all the victory point calculating and the counting of strength for wars can make the entire story of Tigris and Euphrates devolve into just counting 4 colors. Red, black, blue, green. Red, black, blue, green. Do you have the color you need to get the correct color of points? None of these minor complaints are bad things about Tigris and Euphrates. These aren't cons. This is not a review anyways. It's just that this tile-laying intensity has some consequences. And back in the day, back in 1997, when there were less games that checked off so many boxes of interaction, complexity, all while running only an hour, it's so easy to see why this was beloved. But with the 25 years after this game's release, with the hobby exploding in popularity, I started to think of why people are playing board games at game night. Okay, game night. We usually want to hang out with friends in it, share a relaxing and or exciting time, explore a game's mechanics together, and or be swallowed up by a cool universe. Tigris and Euphrates, while being an extremely clever game with lots of competition, actually doesn't do a good job of doing any of these. It's an hour, but an intense hour that doesn't really promote talking with all of its calculating and tons of hidden information. Its incredible tightness of mechanics with only 4 types of tiles doesn't have any novel openings or asymmetric personality. And sure, T&E has a promising universe and premise, but doesn't explore it much, with few unique abilities or characters or factions or scenarios or whatever to tie your imagination to. This made me think of the ancient games of Go and chess that still have a strong following today. And they technically tick off a lot of great boxes: insane replay value, run very true to time, easy setup and takedown, and greatly reward repeat plays. But these aren't friendly games to just hop in and go. They require a certain amount of dedication and intensity from every player. They're like lifestyle games. So then is Tigris and Euphrates, with its abstraction and competitiveness, getting closer to these games in 2022? It's hard to really say because this game is multiplayer and has hidden information. Okay, let's try this. What if I compare T&E to notable multiplayer games today that came out 5 years ago and are above Tigris and Euphrates on BGG ranking? We got Root, a game full of cute woodland creatures with highly distinct factions, fighting over regions in the forest in their own distinct ways, and there's lots of conflict. Or Dune Imperium, a game riding off of the big IP of Doom, with plenty of factions to try out, deck building strategies to try, and plenty conflict on the planet's surface. Or if we go a bit bigger, Brass Birmingham. This is a game where you're working together and not owning locations, just like T&E. But there's supply routes, personal progression, and conflict that is balanced with players working together to grow each other's economies. And look, like giving locations a name can really help with immersion. This isn't even to get into all the cooperative games that have exploded in popularity. And some of these are filled with Avengers-esque feelings of ganging up with your buddies and taking down bosses. Go, 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 synergize powers perfectly together. What I just talked about are all nuanced games that are not abstract and have stories to tell at the table. Whereas, when I brought out Tigris and Euphrates to play recently, the after-game discussion kind of went like this.
Yeah, this is a great game.
Yeah, great design. I see why it's so revered.
Yeah, just really good. So, does that mean we're playing again?
I'm sure there's still tons of people that love it and play it a lot, especially if they're a sucker for abstracts. And remember, BGG rankings are not everything. But other people are probably more like me. We respect it, but find the urge to play it diminished more and more as more colorful and accessible multiplayer options come out. Yeah, I really struggle with Tigris and Euphrates. See, it's a game that is very engaging for me to play and technically fits a convenient time slot of 1 hour with lots of player interaction. It's just that it doesn't fill me with any joy when I'm playing. Like, yes, there are cool plays to be made with placing leaders a certain way, or placing tiles a clever way, or even building monuments or when not to. These can all make me feel clever, but then there's sometimes too much calculating with no spoonful of sugar of theme to help the medicine of the calculations go down. It's a game where turns are quick, but too abstracted for me to feel immersed in ancient Mesopotamia. Has hidden information, but probably too much when you factor in hidden victory points. And there's such a unique scoring mechanism that punishes specialization, which feels bad. But man, are turns intense with everyone pulling the game in their own ways. And I can subtly pick up on people's motivations for their missing colors. And when you combine that with the crazy turnarounds in wars, everyone feels like they have a shot at winning. I'm gripped and totally locked in when I'm playing this game. But it's not really a story that I'm jumping at to share with friends, especially when I know that I'm just calculating 4 colors, even though each color has some slight personality with their placement value and discarding potential. The fluidity and cleverness of mechanics gave me joy at some point, just not anymore. and so I have to keep coming back to the abstraction. I've heard that the theme comes out more as you play, but in fact, I felt the opposite. The more I played Tigris and Euphrates and compared it to other games, the more dry it felt. But then, compared to all the older games I've played that have been obsoleted by my standards, yeah, sorry Hero Quest for not playing you for mechanics, so then Tigris and Euphrates mechanics for 1997 have aged like a fine wine for me. But I'm not really too sure if this is a wine I'm that interested in drinking anymore. So I guess Tigris and Euphrates is a really cool game that isn't insanely fun anymore, but still really respectable, and it only takes an hour so I can play it again and again. I've had a vision, a parallel universe where I wasn't a board game reviewer, but was just relaxing life in the Bahamas or Greece or something. Tigris and Euphrates would be played in many of those lazy afternoons under beautiful weather. Like how there's some backgammon cigar-filled hangout sessions all over Greece. Without the FOMO of what other game I could be playing, or a need to be transported to another universe while playing the game, I could just play Tigris and Euphrates on the regular, pimp out the components, and be satisfied again and again in how many cool war plays you can make. This isn't the actual me with all the games I've been exposed to, but man, there's something weirdly beautiful about playing this classy abstract that doesn't quite fit my newer expectations for a board game experience today. My personal score for this near masterpiece game, 7 out of 10, good. And hey, maybe this game will shoot back up into the top 100 if it gets reprinted again. I know you can do it, Kaniza. I know you can do it. Your game is really good, okay? That video was inspired by a lot of my friends after just playing this older game with them in 2022. So yeah, I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about your experience with this Tigris and Euphrates. And then of course, thank you to all our patrons for making videos like this possible. We got all that stuff over here. Thank you to our patrons, patreon.com/shelfside. Yeah, check it out. Check it out. Anyways, yeah, that's pretty much it. So like, comment, subscribe. I mean, comment about your experience with Tigris and Euphrates, of course. Okay, whatever. Bye-bye.